So Myles Garrett has made it openly known that he wants a trade from the Cleveland Browns. And obviously, myself and the rest of the Panther sphere immediately started to speculate about what that could look like for the Carolina Panthers. Now, I know Myles Garrett comes out of a 4-3 base. We're a 3-4 team. I don't really think that matters. I think Myles Garrett is just a gamer. Doesn't really matter where you put him. He's going to be successful wherever he goes, whatever kind of defensive set that he plays in, right? Defensive base that he plays in. But what would that look like from us from a scheme perspective? What would that look like for us from compensation, right? I think some people are concerned about it when it comes to giving up the 8th overall pick. Now, you would be betting on something like, I don't think like, part of I think the concern that a lot of people would have would be like, man, this, we've seen free agents or, sometimes free agents or sometimes trades go to different places. And I guess the most lopsided one that you think of is Albert Haynesworth from Tennessee to Washington. I don't think this is that. I think this would be more akin to Charles Haley kind of going back and forth between the 49ers and the Dallas Cowboys, right? That much of a difference maker. The kind of difference maker that could take a potential contending team, say Washington or Buffalo, someone who's kind of on the fringe over the top to the next level, right? Now, what you wouldn't want to see is him end up somewhere like Kansas City or Philadelphia, and I don't think you will see, him go to somewhere like that. But how would that look for us? Would it be worth it to give up the 8th overall pick for? Well, one of the things I'd like to look at is production, because that's important. Myles Garrett, this year alone, 83 pressures, number 1 in the league. Huge production. Played a lot of snaps. Didn't really get hurt a lot. And Myles Garrett is a sack machine. We go back to this year, 14 sacks this year, 3 forced fumbles, 23 solo tackles, right? The year previous, 15 sacks. The year before that, 18 sacks. So if there's ever been anybody who can get after the quarterback, it is this guy. The only thing that I do worry about a little bit is the responsibilities of a 3-4 linebacker. Like if you move him to that position, he is going to have the responsibility to kind of drop off into coverage. I don't watch a lot of Cleveland games, so maybe some Cleveland fans can educate me on this, whether or not he's someone that has been able to do that, if he does that. But I'm sure with his athleticism that he would be able to do that. Or if you slide him into that, defensive end, opposite of Derek Brown and the nose tackle, maybe he'd be there as well. And nickel, he'd pretty much play his true position because he'd be in a 4-man front. I think this could work. Would it be worth the 8th overall pick? Well, some of the compensation, as written in The Athletic, that they would be looking for, this is one for the Atlanta Falcons, for example. You'd be looking at a 2025 first-round pick, which would be pick 15 for them, pick 8 for us, and a 2026 first-round pick next year, and obviously we or they would get Garrett. Now, would it be worth that to you? I look at this 2 ways. On one hand, we have not had this type of production from a defensive player since Julius Peppers, right? So without question, it would be worth it from that perspective. On the other hand, I can understand this is a pretty strong defensive class, and maybe you would want to home grow your own talent in a, draft where a lot of guys look, none of them are Myles Garrett. So let's get that out the way. But you do have some guys that are extremely talented that could fit this scheme specifically, and you may not necessarily need a Myles Garrett. I mean, think about it from this perspective. Myles Garrett is probably number 1 defensive player in all of football, right? Number 2 behind him might be Jalen Carter, or you flip a coin between Carter and, say, Chris Jones, right? Well, you got someone like Walter Nolan. A lot of people have been talking about him. He could be a version of a Chris Jones. Would you be willing to give up your 8th overall pick to take a swing on Myles Garrett and not a younger player like Walter Nolan, who you can kind of mold into what you need him to be? That's kind of one of those, toss up in the airs. Now, me personally, I don't think I would be mad either way. I probably would lean more towards, yes, I would give up the 8th overall pick for a player of this caliber, but only if I see what other free agent moves are made. Because bringing Myles Garrett here, you'll get a ton of sacks, but that would be about it, because it's not something that he can do on his own. You still got to be able to stop the run. Now, he's going to be a huge caveat of that. Derek Brown comes back. You got Ashawn Robinson. So you've got players that can help support his cause. But I would like to see more of the moves that they would try to make, specifically at positions like even linebacker potentially. Who knows what the development of, Josie Jewell continues to look like in this system, or, what Trevin Wallace looks like from his development perspective. And, I'd like to see how that's going to mesh as well. So giving up draft capital, especially, and I know a lot of people will be burnt based on what we gave up to get Bryce. Now, hopefully that ends up working out for us long term. But I think with a guy like this, a proven commodity, and again, I say, I don't think this would be of the Albert Haynesworth persuasion. I think this is more the Charles Haley, like, or DeMarcus Ware to, the Broncos. This is going to be a guy that would immediately have an impact that would be felt throughout the organization. It would light a fire, under everyone to perform at the highest level, because you're bringing in somebody who's going to go down as one of the greatest defensive ends in the history of this league. Which brings me to another point. There was an article talking about players that we should bring in and potentially trading picks for. An article about George Pickens. Wide receiver George Pickens has become a popular name in trade speculation, according to this Carolina Panthers SI article. After a relatively disappointing 2024 campaign, so Carolina may want to place a call to the Steelers to check on availability. In the meantime, Bleacher Report's Alex Ballantyne has come up with a trade idea in which the Panthers would be able to land Georgia Bulldogs product. Ballantyne is proposing that the Panthers send a second-round draft pick and a defensive lineman, Ashawn Robinson, to Pittsburgh in exchange for George Pickens and a seventh rounder. I got to be honest with you. I don't know that I'm rolling with that. Here's why. I think that there's receivers in this draft class. I don't think there's a George Pickens in this draft class. What I do believe, however, is that you could possibly mold a player to become your X. Xavier Legette, for example, could become your primary X receiver. Now, is he George Pickens? Absolutely not. But we have already fallen so far in the second round. The drop from pick 8 all the way down to pick 58 is substantial. The last thing that I would want to do in a draft that has such heavy defensive talent is pass on someone who could be a force multiplier for us right away for another potential Deontay Johnson situation, right? If he's having problems there in an organization that has that kind of structure that just went to the playoffs, why would you want to bring him in here to kind of have a similar, situation? I personally would love to see us just home grow this, or, somebody else, not him. Now, I'm not saying that he wouldn't be, extremely good for us. He wouldn't, help, shore up that X position, because obviously that would be the case. And you would have much more opportunities for your guys underneath. And, it would open up the field way more for your guys, because you got that one-on-one opportunity, on the outside. But I don't know. I guess maybe I'm kind of burned from the Deontay situation to where I'm like, I wouldn't want to bring in a similar problem, even though the production would be off the charts. As they wrote here, the Panthers offense could use some altitude and swagger. Young seemed to have found a groove at the end of the season, but giving Young a playmaking receiver with no confidence issues could elevate the ceiling. Pickens might have some flaws, but he doesn't lack confidence, and that is very true, right? And I do think, I've said this before in another video, I do believe that Bryce Young has built up some thicker skin, if you will, right? To where he could deal with someone like a bigger personality like a George Pickens. Now, personally, at pick number 8, and this is one of the things that I kind of concern myself with about the whole Myles situation. Personally, at pick number 8, if Ted McMillan is there, hey, send the card in, because all day and tomorrow. But I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, man. I'm interested in this situation with Myles Garrett. I think I'm out on the whole George Pickens situation, but I can see if some of you guys would think otherwise. But let me know what you think either way. Make sure to comment, like, and subscribe. Tell me everything you want to talk about below. I'll be back with more content soon, guys. I appreciate y'all. Keep pounding.